Today's video is sponsored by Hyperspace, a tabletop game of interstellar conquest. Hyperspace features 25 unique alien civilizations, including, and this is a slight spoiler, several races from the works of H.P. Lovecraft, all vying for control of a newly discovered star cluster. Uniquely, Hyperspace features no upkeep phase, meaning that games are usually shorter, about 90 minutes for 4 players. What's more, play never really stops, so there's constant action. If this sounds good to you, check out the link to Peterson Games down in the description. The First Order had a devastatingly powerful fleet. Aided by Starkiller Base, it ripped through the New Republic and threatened to allow the First Order's conquering of the galaxy in mere weeks. Still, one has to wonder, what exactly makes up the First Order fleet? We know obviously that resurgent battlecruisers would have been a large portion of their navy, as well as of course stranger ships like the Mandator IV and Supremacy classes, but what about specifically old Imperial Star Destroyers? It seems both unlikely and unnecessary that a galaxy-conquering fleet would be comprised entirely of new starships, especially where the New Republic was demilitarized. Even with First Order sympathetic senators, it seems unlikely that along with Starkiller Base, there was the needed funds to construct the sheer quantity of ships needed to actually take over the galaxy, with the obvious caveat that we don't know what's going on in the unknown regions and beyond. However, notwithstanding that, we can actually answer this question pretty easily. There were 3 Star Destroyers, one of them Imperial class, 4 frigates, 2 Venerable Lancer class, 2 Maxima A heavy cruisers, and 1 Dissident class light cruiser. That's from before the Awakening, and confirms the use of not only Imperial Star Destroyers, but also the Lancer class, which in Legends was a widespread Imperial ship. Based on the use of the word venerable, I'm assuming canon is going with the same thing, and this all takes place several months before the events of episode 7. So that was easy. Yes, they did use Imperial Star Destroyers, but I want to dig a little bit deeper. How many did they use, and in what capacity? First, we have the Aftermath trilogy and associated content detailing Project Cinder, which saw the planned destruction of much of the Imperial military. However, Cinder did not destroy everything. Prior to the Battle of Jakku, ships had been hidden across the galaxy. When reading Imperial naval records on Coruscant, Admiral Sloane discovers, and I quote, 75% of the Star Destroyers in service before Endor can capably be tracked to similar fates, destroyed, captured, lost in confirmable, if curious ways, but a full quarter of these ships cannot be accounted for. Records show fateful ends that contradict their black box recording. Does the Empire have more ships than she knows? Ghost fleets out there somewhere? Are they operating independently? Have they been captured or abandoned? Something else may be going on. Later, in a discussion with Fleet Admiral Gallius Rax, her suspicions are confirmed. Portions of our naval fleet have been hidden since not long after the destruction of our glorious battle station over the Endor moon. These fleets are not as large as the one we control here in Vulpinus, yet they are substantive just the same. Hundreds of Star Destroyers, thousands of smaller craft. These hidden fleets would later be recalled to Jakku, at least according to Gallius Rax, where many would be destroyed. But many too would flee to a designated location in the unknown regions, where the Empire would die, reborn as the First Order. It's my theory that these hidden fleets were not the 25% missing ships, but rather vessels which were feigned to be destroyed, as described in the quote above as lost in curious ways. I also think as the lore evolves, that quote will be retconned to refer only to destroyed or non-active ships, rather than the whole fleet itself, or perhaps only a portion of the Navy. Because there's just no realistic way that the New Republic managed to destroy most of the Empire's military forces in a year. It's also unclear how many ships fled from Jakku, and aside from the Eclipse, Palpatine's Super Star Destroyer, whether there were vessels at the rendezvous point already. Personally, I believe that much of the Empire's elite, not in status but in talent, had been moved out of the galaxy already. This would include the likes of Thrawn, if he's still alive, which is why there are constant references to old and unskilled officers ruling the Imperial remnant. Although this can't be substantiated, I personally believe that what's been set aside represents substantive Imperial power, and what's more, will make up, if not the bulk, at least a significant portion of the First Order fleet. We get the following quote from Bloodline, which talks about First Order funds being used to refit Imperial ships. The First Order itself could finally emerge from hiding to claim its rightful place with the lost vessels of the Imperial fleet. And also, if the will of the galaxy were truly so anti-Empire, there's no way so much of the Imperial fleet could have escaped. So funds were being set aside for a refit, and I'm not sure whether Imperial Star Destroyers were getting new weapon systems, or perhaps whether the ships were being disassembled and used to create First Order Star Destroyers. Based on the fact that Poe sees an actual ISD, I think probably the former. However, I will note that the New Republic at least did disassemble Star Destroyers and made ships like the Starhawk, so it's not impossible. Finally, we see in both the trailer for the next episode of Resistance and in Battlefront 2 that the First Order has fleets across the galaxy. I think it's very likely, just due to the limited industrial capacity of the First Order, that many of these fleets were made up largely, or perhaps totally, of Imperial vessels. But I know what you're wondering. Why didn't we see ISDs in Snoke fleet? Well, Snoke's fleet would have been the best of the best, which is why it would have been made up of resurgent Star Destroyers. This is just like we only see the First Order at Crate use new AT-M6s and new AT-ATs. Elsewhere, it's quite likely that Imperial Walkers are still seeing service. So, is the First Order still using ISDs? Yes, and other Imperial-era ships. And personally, although there's no lore to support my opinion, I think they made up a vast portion of the First Order fleet. I have a little theory about Episode 9, which I don't want to overly get into, but I think we might see some sort of First Order schism, perhaps a civil war. I think it'd be pretty cool to see a fleet of Star Destroyers taking on some resurgence. It would be a really cool opening scene, sort of like the beginning of Revenge of the Sith. But that's just my opinion, and I'm really curious to hear what you guys think. Do you think the ISD is still in fairly wide use within the First Order? Let me know down below. Today's question comes from Rogue Asami, who asks, are the novelizations for the original and prequel trilogy movies considered canon? And if not, do you know or think they could be rewritten, edited, and subsequently re-released so that they are again canon? That's a great question. So they are technically canon within the Legends continuity, but under the new Disney continuity, no, they are not. And for some, that's probably good. Like, A New Hope has some really strange differences, especially with the prologue. However, I would really like to see Revenge of the Sith adapted slightly, and again, I'm talking very slightly, then brought into the new continuity. I do think it will eventually happen, it's just not at the top of Lucasfilm's priority list. Great question though. If you guys have one you'd like me to answer, make sure to leave it down below with the hashtag AskEck. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. As always, this has been EckhartsLadder. I missed you yesterday, but of course, until next time, may the Force be with you.